Bigger.
Bigger, you can do it. Okay. Bigger. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to And They Were Classmates. This week is going to be a little bit different. Nolan isn't here. She wasn't able to make it this week. And we thought about it, and we thought about just not putting out an episode this week. But I offered to do a sort of mini-sode so that we didn't have to leave you guys hanging after we already thought we were going to leave people hanging until September. So I am here, and I thought that this would be a great opportunity to kind of get to know you guys. And by that, I mean for you to get to know me. Because I keep realizing that as we've been going through, Nolan and I make a lot of references to ourselves. We don't really talk about ourselves all that much, I guess. Like, we talked about some situations that we're in, but I feel like I haven't really talked to you guys about, like, I don't know, who I am, anything about me. So I guess I thought I'd start with that. My name is Jess. I am 23 years old. I think I've mentioned that before. I just graduated college. That's actually how this podcast started, was Nolan and I were college classmates. She's a bit younger than me because, it's a community college. That's how it goes. You guys have seen Community, right? Yeah. I feel like most people have. So I live with my dad and my grandma. This matters because I'm also my grandma's caretaker for a good chunk of the day. So a lot of my stories involve her. My grandma Kathy, I love her very much. My parents live separately. They always, as far as I can remember, they have. But my mom lives less than a mile away from me, and she is also disabled, so I also help take care of her. But her main caretaker is her roommate and my boyfriend, who's not the same person. Well, kind of is. Her roommate, Doug, and my boyfriend, who also lives there and helps out with her. His name is Ace. And Ace and I have been dating for about 8 years now. And that we started dating my freshman year of high school. It was his junior year. And he's in every story I have, so that's why I feel like it's important to mention him. Like I said, his name is Ace. And I like him a lot. He's a really cool guy. Someday I hopefully will get him on this podcast, but we'll see. I do have a couple of other friends who are also students here who you guys might see at some point, just by pure virtue of they're students, so they're allowed in our recording space. Because we use an on-campus recording space that I have access to as an alumnus and Nolan has access to as a student. So my friends Shelby and Donovan may make appearances, and I love them both very, very dearly. But Shelby especially. Shelby is my best friend, and she's also someone that you'll hear me talk about a lot. She is a little bit younger. She's, I think, a year or two younger than me. I never remember. Once you hit adulthood, you really stop keeping track of how old your friends are. Once you're not doing that, well, I'm technically 4 months older than you thing. It's, so Shelby and I spend pretty much every day together. We hang out at least 3 times a week. We actually go to bingo on, the nights before we record. So we record on Wednesday mornings. On Tuesday nights, I go out to bingo with her and her mom. And I'm actually going to a concert. Her mom invited me to a concert this weekend, so I'll be going to that. Other important things about me. I work at a church as well. I am a Sunday school coordinator and just all-around assistant for services at the church that I grew up in my hometown. I'm very proud of that fact, and I'm very happy about it, because I love working with kids and being a, shall we say, visibly queer person. I mean, you guys have seen me. I'm the one with bangs on in the thumbnails. So I like being a visibly queer, Christian person for them, so they don't grow up thinking that they have to look or act or be a certain way. Because I'm also pretty, openly non-binary, at least, in how I present, and openly bisexual, but not in a way where I'm sitting the kids down and being I'm a non-binary and I'm a bisexual and this is what that means for you. I mean it in a I don't hide my life way. I mean that in a I very openly use she, they pronouns way in a, if the kids ask me questions, like little kids ask you weird questions all the time. When I tell them I have a boyfriend, there's sometimes where the kids will be like, oh, well, have you ever had a girlfriend? I'll be like, yeah. And they'll be like, oh, cool. And it's kind of like, it's nice to be that person in the church for someone, because I know I needed that as a kid. You know what I mean? I think you guys get it. But yeah, I just thought that was a really good opportunity to kind of lay that on the ground floor. Nolan eventually is going to have her own episode, probably towards the end of summer. So hopefully, I don't know if she's going to do the same thing. I don't know what she's going to do, but this is what I'm doing with my time. Oh, one of the most important things about me, I love theater. I love musical theater. I love film, mostly because it's also theater. I love cinema. My boyfriend jokes that I'm the most annoying normal cinephile you'll ever meet, because I get really annoying about some of the most like chill movies out there, just because I love learning so much about my favorite movies and films and stuff like that. When I was in college, which sounds weird to say because I'm less than a month removed, but I took a lot of film classes. I love film. I thought about being a film minor. I thought about being a film professor. I love film. I love theater. I love breaking it down. I love analyzing performances. I love analyzing scripts. Oh, do not get me started on set design. Like, I am one of those people, but I'm not like that about movies. like I hate to put it this way. I'm not like that about good movies. Like, I've never seen Citizen Kane. I've never seen a lot of classics. But you know what movie I am so annoying about? I am so annoying about this movie. Barbie. I love the Barbie movie. And I know that makes me like kind of basic, because everyone loves the Barbie movie. But you don't know the Barbie movie like I know the Barbie movie, okay? I also adore Scott Pilgrim versus the World in a you don't know her like I know her way. Scott Pilgrim versus the World especially. In case you haven't noticed in the thumbnails, I kind of have a Ramona Flowers haircut right now, mostly entirely on purpose. But I just really, really enjoy how they use Scott Pilgrim as a media. Not just as like a film series or a graphic novel series. I'm probably like rotating back and forth. Okay, so I really enjoy Scott Pilgrim versus the World, the movie. That was the first thing I saw out of it. And I just was enamored by that movie. I rented it from the library like a year or two after it came out. And I remember the only reason my library had it was because we had our library had a full set of the Scott Pilgrim graphic novels, and they were popular enough being checked out at the teen center that they were willing to buy the movie, even though it didn't do great when it first came out, even though it should have, because I love that movie. But I really like how they use Scott Pilgrim as an IP to tell a sort of, what was it? I saw it written out once. It was transmedia. What was it? I think they called it a transmedia character analysis or something like that, which I thought was a really interesting way of looking at it because, for those who don't know, Scott Pilgrim versus the World has 3 different main, like, I don't want to say, like, the IP Scott Pilgrim and the character of Scott Pilgrim has 3 main, like, forms of media that he exists in. There's the graphic novels, which is Scott Pilgrim's Precious Little Life. There's the movie Scott Pilgrim versus the World that has like every movie star that I love in it, but right before they got really big, besides like a couple of them. And then there is Scott Pilgrim Takes Off, which is an animated series that was just put out on Netflix in the last year or so. And all 3 of them are entirely different. They are separate. Like, well, I wouldn't say that because they do follow the same basic plot of Scott Pilgrim has to defeat Ramona's 7 evil exes, or this League of 7 evil exes is at least coming for Scott because he's dating Ramona. Like that is the base plot of all of them, but all of them take entirely separate directions, right? So the comics end up fleshing out their relationship a lot more, and it feels a lot more focused on their relationship as a whole, at least in my like memory. I'm just starting a reread of them right now. But it focuses a lot more on like building up that and really making you understand why Scott wants to fight for Ramona so bad, right? Whereas the movie focuses a lot more on Scott and how all of this affects him versus how it affects him and Ramona, if that makes sense. So, and then the show takes an entirely third perspective where Scott isn't even in the picture. Scott gets like, spoilers, Scott gets killed in the first episode, technically. So, or at least taken care of in the first episode. So then the rest of the series ends up following Ramona as she tries to get Scott back because she feels bad about how he, as far as she knows, literally died for this girl that he had just met. And all three of them are really interesting takes because they all came out at very different points, right? Because the first, technically the movie and the comics came out around the same time, right? They both came out in like the early 2000s. But the Scott Pilgrim Takes Off just came out recently, and you can tell. And I don't mean that in a, it's woke garbage, don't listen to it. I don't mean it like that. Clearly, I don't mean it like that. I am too gay for that. But, but what I mean is that it takes a much more healthy approach, if that makes sense. It treats Ramona much more like a person. It treats a lot of the women much more like people in a way that a lot of media kind of fell into in the early 2000s, especially comics, because as much as a lot of people tried to argue against it, comics were written for men and still are for the most part, which is really unfortunate as, a girl that likes comics. But I just like reading in general. I'm a big believer in never stopping. This is going to sound bad. I think you should always be consuming media. But I don't mean that in like a having TikTok in front of you all the time way. I mean that in a, you should be reading a book at any given time. Like there should be at least one book you're working on. You should be working on finishing a show. You should be working on like, I'm working through this series of movies. Like, because I have gone through periods in my life where I wasn't doing that. I was just sitting myself in front of TikTok. And even though I was still like, I wasn't bored, I was taking in, like I was consuming media, but I wasn't digesting it. I wasn't thinking about it. It wasn't making me like fire any synapses, like, and it made me genuinely really depressed. And I think that that's true for a lot of people. That's why I always recommend, if you have a library near you, like a public library, please, 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 I'm begging you on my hands and knees, go and check out your local library. I love our local library. They do so many community events right now. It's summer. It is June as of recording. Happy Pride Month. And all of us, the library in my town is really cool because especially during COVID, they shifted from focusing on like almost exclusively kids and families to focusing on being like very community oriented. Like they were always very family oriented, but I feel like maybe I just noticed it more because I was finally like an adult who could go to a lot more of the events because they were more interesting to me now. But it feels like they've become so much more community focused and wanting to reach out that way. And I think that becomes clear because our summer reading program is all ages. And I think that's very, very, very important. I think that was the whole point of this, was if you guys have like a summer reading program or something, if you want to get back into reading, join a summer reading program. It's so nice. It helps you just keep track of it. You can keep track of what you're reading. I'm getting put in for drawings for everything that I read. So it's like incentivizing me to continue reading even more than just, the love of the game would. But yeah, I really love the library and reading. I am currently working on Where the Crawdads Sing. I picked that up because it was one of the recommended summer books, probably because right now where we're at, it's like 90 degrees and you can cut through the air with scissors because it's so muggy. So sitting out there and wearing Where the Crawdads Sing, which takes place in like a marsh, is really just, I'm really immersed in the experience. But you should definitely sign up for a reading program, or at least just get a library card. You can get so many things at the library. Like at our local library, I know like every library besides books offers DVDs, CDs, usually audiobooks. And summer reading programs count audiobooks, by the way. People always are like, well, I don't know if I can count, like they're like, I don't know if listening to audiobooks counts as reading. It absolutely counts as reading because you're still taking in the book. Just because you can't sit there and focus on like actually reading the words, that's fine. It happens. You want to read the book, listen to it. It happens. We all did it as a kid. Why should we stop as adults? I listened to I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream through an audiobook, and I honestly think I appreciate the media more because of that. because I got to hear the words spoken, the dialogue spoken, instead of just seeing it written on a page. But I also might be a little biased because I'm a big fan of reading along at home. But even if you don't, like, just setting up a library card is so important because so many things that they offer aren't just like books and movies and stuff like that. Like our local library, you can check out experiences, right? So that's what they call it, where you can check out like a weekend pass to a water park nearby. Like they partner up with a bunch of stuff nearby and they offer you just free entry or reduced price entry. And they call that renting out an experience. And then you bring the ticket back and the next person can do it. It's really cool. They also rent out like a seed library where they just keep so many seeds on one shelf all year long, and you can just come and take what you need. The only thing they ask is that you leave anything that you don't still in the seed pouches. And I've gone and I've grabbed from there a couple of times because I've needed tomatoes or something like that. And I've really appreciated having something like that. And I know that a lot of people around here are really food insecure, especially near, in the like downtown area by our library. There's a lot of people who are dealing with being unhoused and being like dealing with food scarcity, or they're only just barely scraping by, like stuff like that. And the library is a huge spot for them. And that I know for a lot of people, they're like, there's so many, I don't want to be around all the homeless people. Grow up. Like, I'm being so for real. Grow up. They're people. They're people. They just don't, they're just in a worse spot than you. You could be there too at any moment. We live in the USA. There's no real safety net for most of us. So I think that people, like, you can't avoid community areas just because you're worried that what you think are undesirables are going to be there, because it's there for them too. You know, everyone needs to go and get some free air conditioning and some free Wi-Fi and maybe some cheap eats every once in a while, you know? And I don't think we need to look down on anyone for that, because I think looking down on anyone for that makes you infinitely worse than anything that they could have done, like barring the obvious, right? And I'm saying this as someone that has had several issues with, this is going to sound bad, someone that's had several issues with unhoused people in the past, but I've never held it against them. As someone that is feminine presenting, I call myself a woman because it's easier, but feminine, non-binary, you know? And as someone that presents as a woman, more importantly, and as someone that is like AFAB, or assigned female at birth, for those who don't know, I deal with men on the street a lot, and by virtue of that, a lot of them are homeless men or houseless people or whatever, like, you know, and I, like, even though if they yell at me, it's never that I'm like, ugh, that like dirty homeless person. Like, no, I would never think that way. It's more of like gross man. Like, just like a gross person, or if it's a woman that's like yelling at me, like what, like, but then like whenever it's someone that's unhoused, or like in general, I'm one of those people where I always think to myself, like trying to put myself in their shoes, I guess would be the best way to put that. And just kind of being like, well, like, it's shitty that you're yelling, like, come over here, sweet thing, whatever, at me. Like, that's whatever. But I can't find it in my heart to ever hate someone for circumstances out of their control like that, if that makes sense. Like, I know a lot of people that when stuff like that happens and they tell their friends about it later, it's always like, this dirty fucking bum, they were being so gross and they stank and they were hitting on me and I thought it was so yucky and whatever. And I'm like, no, don't do that shit. Like, don't, genuinely. That's so awful. Say that they're gross and slimy for being creepy. Like, yeah, that's one thing, but not just for being homeless. Like, not just for not having a house, not just for being unable to shower, because I can't help that most of the time. I've had my stuff stolen. I had my stuff stolen from a production that I was in, because I was in a musical, and an unhoused person was able to get into our unlocked rehearsal space and performance space and just rifle through and stole. I think I had almost $500 worth of stuff stolen. A lot of it was irreplaceable. I don't know if you guys know what an Eda bag is. It was really big in the early 2000s. I don't know if it's still popular, because even then it was only really big in like the anime and like convention scene, because that was why I had one. Because an Ida bag is a bag that has a, like, it usually has a flat fabric front and then a plastic covering in front of that, so you can attach all your pins in it and show them off. And I was really into cons for a very, very long time. I only got out of cons when they closed down in 2020, and I haven't been able to afford to go back yet. But so I had a bag that was just covered in pins that I'd gotten from cons. I'd received as gifts from friends. I'd gotten them, like, some of them were pins that I had gotten when I was in Texas on a trip. Some of them I'd gotten in France. Like, it was just covered in pins. And he stole it and stuffed it full of stuff, like other people's stuff, and used it to, and then, like, pawned everything. And I never got my bag or any of my pins back. Like, I never got any of my stuff back. And a lot of people are surprised that I have stories like that, like stories of being, like, hassled while I'm trying to eat and all that. And they're like, and you still... This sounds, like, so conceited, but they're like, but you still care about homeless people. Like, they're like, you still care a lot. And I don't want it to sound like I'm trying to be on, like, some grandstand about I care about homeless people and other people don't, because that's not what I'm trying to get at. I guess I'm just trying to get at, like, they're people first. That's why I like to say unhoused instead of homeless, because even though they are, like, realistically without a home, that has such a negative connotation now, right? Like, it's kind of like, it's one of those words that's technically correct, but I'm trying to veer away from using it. I'm also running into the same thing with illegal versus undocumented immigrants. Because even though technically illegal is a way to describe that, like, they do technically enter the country illegally, that has such a negative connotation because of what so many of those people were running from, if that makes sense. Like, I don't want to call people like, oh, you're here illegally because your parents were so desperate and loved you so much that they brought you to the US so that they could desperately hope to give you American citizenship so you could escape the hardships that they faced in your home country. Like, that's not like, oh, an illegal immigrant. That's an undocumented immigrant, and they're not an immigrant, realistically, to me. But I'm also, the woke left. I'm fighting the woke mind virus on the side of the virus. So, I can only say so much. Oh, I hope you guys know what I'm referencing when I say that. I don't know. It's a picture of, I don't even remember anymore. I want to say it's Marx, like Karl Marx, but he's, like, fit, he's built, he's stocky, he's all muscle, and he's running with a sickle in one hand and, like, the hammer in the other, like, towards the camera. Yeah, that image is what made me laugh so hard at my own joke, and I'm very sorry, but I think of it every single time I say the woke mind virus, and it makes me laugh every single time. I've really been rambling here. I guess this is what I mean when I tell you guys that I'm really annoying, but about, like, the most normal, like, banal stuff. I'm really annoying, but about Scott Pilgrim versus the World and libraries. I think that's what happens when you spend so long being annoying as, like, a social justice warrior on, like, Tumblr and Twitter, and then you reach a certain age where you're, like, sick of it and you can't keep doing that, but then you have to find new things to be annoying about. I can't be annoying about gender and pronouns forever, but because that's just exhausting mentally. But you know what isn't exhausting mentally? Trying to get people to go to the library is really exhausting mentally. Talking about movies to no one. Just talking into a mic like I am right now. That's... Because I don't like talking movies. I've been in a lot of film classes, and there is a very specific genre of guy that likes movies that I absolutely despise interacting with. And unfortunately, those types are the main people that you meet in those classes. It's that, and then it's a bunch of, like, I'm going to be so honest with you. Film classes are all film bros and queer people, whether they realize it yet or not. Because I met a lot of people in the film program that told me they were straight and cis. And, I'm not going to assume anything about their identities because that's not my place. We don't assume things here. But I recognized a few eggshells. For those who don't know, there's a phrase in the LGBT community, specifically the trans community, about someone being in their egg still, which is usually that someone is very someone that is trans but doesn't realize it yet, or does realize it and hasn't come out yet or really done anything, like it's that kind of thing. And I recognized a couple in a couple of the guys very clear eggshells, which I feel bad saying, because if I'm wrong, then I'm just like falling into stereotypes. But I mean that in like the way that they spoke about gender, the way that they talked about their relationship to their own gender, especially when I took a cinema focusing on LGBT and queer movies. And when we got to But I'm a Cheerleader, which was like, I think the second or third movie we watched. It might have even been the first. But we were watching But I'm a Cheerleader, which is one of my favorite movies, and I fully believe everyone should watch it. If for no other reason than to just hear how many times she goes, "I'm a homosexual," because it's just so good. But that movie is so strict about gender roles. Like it's the whole thing is that they're learning their like traditional gender roles, and hearing how some of the guys talked about their relationship to gender and gender roles, it was very clear that they struggled to align themselves properly with masculinity. And I'm not trying to out anyone with that. That's why I'm specifically being kind of vague. But it's so interesting to hear, especially someone that like definitely was saying that stuff before I came out. Like I am someone who, like, even though I've always been like feminine, I've like, okay, I need to gather my thoughts here. So I have always aligned with being feminine, and I have in the past aligned myself with womanhood. But as I've gotten older, right, I've realized that my femininity was not the same as feeling womanly, if that makes sense. I am someone who's, I love dresses, I love skirts, I love makeup. I don't mind, like, I'm not even one of those people, like, I started using she, they pronouns because I got tired of correcting people to use they, them. But I now am glad that I switched to that because I feel it aligns with who I am more, and that's why I don't correct people. But even though I align myself with femininity, it's still hard to align myself with womanhood. I am feminine. I love all of that stuff. I am like, I was born with a uterus and ovaries and breasts. So I experience all of the things that come with that. I'm not really interested in transitioning, but I'm still not a woman. And that was how a lot of the people there talked about gender, was they were like, I like, or the opposite, where they were like, I align myself with being a man, but I don't align myself with masculinity, which was also really interesting, for its own reason. But that's mostly just because of how much, like, to like carbon date this episode, for the last week, I've been keeping track of, on TikTok, there was this guy, Nurse John, that got into a bit of trouble. Well, I don't want to call it trouble because he only literally got in trouble with one person. But Nurse John is a Filipino man, and he makes a lot of skits about, being a nurse, specifically Filipino nurses, and how helpful they are, at least recently. But he made a post about having like a wife and kids recently, and he's a very feminine person. Like, and I don't mean that, it's so hard to discuss this and like describe it. He is like very much like, a lot of people assumed he was gay because of how feminine he acted, because he's, I don't want to say flamboyant because that's not the word that I'm looking for, but he's just one of, you ever met like a guy that grew up like very clearly with sisters and hanging out with women, but he also like, but that didn't make him gay. Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, that's like, he's very feminine, and he has like that affection to his voice, and he takes care of his skin, and people like took all of that and made it and assumed that he was gay. And then he said he had a wife and kids, and then he got accused of queerbaiting, which is dumb because real people can't queerbait. They're real people. Like, queerbait is exclusively something that you use for media because it's like explicitly like planned from the beginning that this person was never queer. They were just trying to appeal to the queer community. A person existing can't queerbait. Two people, like, the same thing happened when like Dan, like, to age myself, to show that I'm 23, when Dan and Phil, before they came out, people would accuse them of queerbaiting because they both said they were straight men. even though they didn't behave like it according to stereotypes. Like, I keep having to like asterisk according to stereotypes. I hope you guys realize that I don't think that all gay men are like feminine and are like the like stereotypical like work girl, queen, whatever. Like, cause that's fine. I know so many gay men like that, and that's fine, but that's not all of them, right? And that's the problem, is that the opposite could have also happened, where if Nurse John had been a gay man who was just very like masculine, no one would have questioned if he was gay. They would have assumed that he was that. And then when it turned out that he was gay, he had that would have been a 50-50 shot of him getting in trouble and people being like, I can't believe you're trying to indoctrinate all of us by hiding your queerness or whatever. So it was really interesting to see literally the reverse happen of a man being assumed to be gay, and then people find out that he's straight, and then someone accuses him of queerbaiting and says that acting like that is making fun of, like, it's so weird to look at someone and how they act and be like, the way that you act is wrong because I took it the wrong way, you know? I don't know. It's all weird. I think I've been rambling long enough. I figured this would be kind of a mini-sode for you guys. I know we usually aim for about an hour and a half, but I figure if it's just me, I'm not that interesting, so I will stick it to a half hour or thereabouts. So we will catch you guys next week with both of us. At some point, I don't know if it will be sooner or later, Nolan will have a mini-sode up of her own. If nothing else, I know it'll be up by like before the end of summer, like the end of August, because there's at least 1 week at the end of August that I know I have to miss, like for sure. But yeah, we will catch you guys next week with Nolan back. I hope you guys enjoyed listening to me just kind of ramble about things that interest me. I tried to keep it mostly coherent for you guys. If you're still listening, I really appreciate it. I'm glad that you care. Hopefully, Nolan and I will have some socials up for you guys to follow. But in the meantime, please just follow our current podcast page on our YouTube. We are available on YouTube and Spotify at And They Were Classmates Pod and They Were Classmates Podcast. I also heavily encourage you guys to go and check out Nolan's personal channel. She is really doing some cool stuff over there. I don't know if she wants me to plug it, so she's also my editor. So if you don't want me to plug your stuff, edit this out. But I also have a few socials of my own. I don't know which ones I want to plug yet, because I think I'm going to start some new ones, because I have some that are more public facing and some that are more personal facing. So I'm going to mess with that stuff. But for now, I know that she has that one public profile that she's been trying to get out there, and I would like her to get it out there too. So check us out. We will see you next week. More fun stuff coming soon. Bye-bye.